Welcome to the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie. After learning a ton about kidney stones and helping people prevent stones at the University of Chicago, I was fed up with all the terrible advice people were finding online. So I decided to do something about it. The Kidney Dietitian was born. This podcast is for people who want to learn what actually works to prevent kidney stones and still enjoy life, eating, and their favorite foods. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the 92nd episode of the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. As always, I'm your host, registered dietitian and kidney stone expert, Melanie. And today I wanted to do a slightly different episode and give everyone sort of a recap and summary of my time at the National Kidney Foundation meeting in Boston. I just got back a couple days ago from that conference, and I had such a wonderful time. And I did a similar episode actually for the Kidney Stone conference that I went to a couple months ago, the ROC meeting. You want to check out that episode from a couple months ago, and I got really good feedback. So I thought that I might do the same for the National Kidney Foundation. So just for some context, the National Kidney Foundation is, of course, one of the major national nonprofit organizations that does a lot of professional education. So helping educate dietitians, doctors, social workers, pharmacists, technicians, all sorts of different groups of people about kidney care, right? All of the aspects of kidney healthcare and helping keep our health care team as well educated and up to date on the science as possible. So that is really sweet. And then NKF also does a ton of work around advocacy for kidney-related issues and just kind of like public education, public awareness of kidney health, because we all know that kidney disease and kidney stones certainly, but kidneys in general certainly do not get the street cred or the awareness that many other common conditions such as diabetes or cancer or heart disease get. So lots of really, really wonderful work going on. And it was also actually a special time for the NKF because it's their 75th anniversary. So 75 years, we were celebrating 75 years of NKF. And it really is such a wonderful meeting. It was in Boston this year. It's held in the spring every year, and it's so much fun. I'm actually on the planning committee for this meeting, which is such a great experience, to kind of have a say as to which topics are held at this meeting on this really rather large stage. Personally, sort of selfishly, it's a great way to connect with people and network and connect with friends. I have, so many friends in the kidney nutrition world. Honestly, that's kind of been an unforeseen benefit of putting myself out there. And when I started the Kidney Dietitian, just putting myself in the online space, which has been like, oh my gosh, guys, it's been 5 years almost since I started the Kidney Dietitian, which is insane. But it's a welcome benefit of just being able to connect with people and meeting truly some of my best friends that I've met through online, just and fellow kidney dietitians. So that was really cool, and it was so good to see so many of them, meet new friends, and also meet dietitians and other kidney professionals who I've maybe connected with online or been in Zoom meetings with for years and haven't actually met in person. So socially, it was really, really a very fun event. And also you may or may not know, I am the mom of twin, almost 3-year-olds. They're going to be 3 in just a couple of weeks. And I enjoyed the time away. Not going to lie. I was able to sleep and no one woke me up and it was really nice. So I had a really great time. I do have to mention, I'm going to go into kind of some of the talks that I gave and that I attended to kind of help give you some updates that I thought were most interesting, at least in the kidney world. But I did want to mention that attendance for the meeting was dismally low. Don't quote me on this, but apparently it was. I don't know the percentage, so I'm not going to throw it out there. But I know that attendance was very, very low for this meeting, and I don't know if this is in line with other professional meetings, but they suspect that perhaps a lot of universities don't have a lot of funding right now because a lot of grant money is either canceled or in question, and so there's sort of a freeze on a lot of travel for researchers and for people working in academia, which is kind of scary. Also, perhaps international participants or international attendees who might have come otherwise didn't really want to or didn't feel safe to come to the United States right now, and also people perhaps are a little bit wary of traveling, given a lot of the plane issues that have been happening the last 6 months or so. So I'm just wanted to kind of throw that out there because I think that's something that's really, really important that the world knows, that scientific meetings like this that are critical for people to stay up to date and be providing the best care possible are being impacted by kind of what's going on in the world. So wanted to mention that. I'm going to kind of break down some of the, like I said, the talks that I gave and also that I moderated. I mentioned that I'm on the planning committee, so I was very involved. I was a very busy bee while I was in Boston last week. I moderated 3 sessions, and I actually spoke at 3 different sessions. And of course, had a host of meetings and dinners, and it was fun. It was busy, but it was a lot of fun. I also volunteered at the Renal Dietetic Practice Group booth at the expo part of the conference. If you've never been to a professional conference, at least in my experience, typically we have sort of the scientific sessions. And then there's usually sort of a separate floor, a big room of booths from different sponsors because we need to get money somehow, right? And so there's sponsors. And so like at Fancy, the dietitian conference, typically there's a whole bunch of different food companies that are, it's fun to kind of go and learn about new products and new companies and whatever. At the NKF meeting, the expo floor is definitely mostly big pharma companies. And so kind of, sharing information about new medications and that sort of thing. There also were like sort of nephrology specific publications, some nonprofits, and there was the RPG booth. So the renal practice group, if you aren't familiar, is the sort of the subgroup of renal dietitians, of kidney dietitians within the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And the Academy is the dietitians' national professional organization, like general dietitian, nothing to do with kidney specifically, but just like general national kidney. I am actually in just a few weeks stepping into the chair role of the RPG group. And so as part of that, I helped volunteer with our booth to kind of help raise awareness of renal dietitians, of all of the different things that RPG offers. And also, there's a lot of dietitians stopped by, but there was also a lot of doctors and nurses. And so it was really cool to be able to talk to other professions about the importance of dietitians and part of the care of people with kidney disease and kidney stones. I always slip those in there as much as possible because that is my true love. I love kidney disease too, but kidney stones are definitely my favorite group of people to work with. So it was cool to be able to work at that booth, especially as I'm stepping into the chair role and kind of represent that group. So I'm just going to give kind of a high level overview of the different talks that I gave and also the ones that I moderated or some that I felt like were just really, really interesting. So I mentioned that I gave 3 different talks at the conference this year, which was a lot. The first one was actually the first day of the conference. And I talked about, I believe it was called something like Beyond Oxalate, like holistic nutrition for kidney stone prevention or something. And I really just kind of really did a deep dive into why low oxalate diets are really not the best option for our patients and into sort of whole body, thinking about oxalate in terms of whole body metabolism and nutrition and not just sort of this very blind, what oxalate we eat equals how much oxalate is in our urine. Because if you've been around me for a while, that is definitely not true. I have a ton of content around how a low oxalate diet really is probably not the best option for people with kidney stones. There's no data to show that a low oxalate diet prevents stones. And in fact, we have a lot of data that says the exact opposite, that very high oxalate dietary patterns, such as a Mediterranean style diet or a DASH style diet, actually are consistently associated with a lower risk of stones. And when you really think about it, it kind of makes sense because higher oxalate foods happen to be the exact same foods that are packed full of things that are really, really good for kidney stones. And when someone is on a strict low oxalate diet, you're losing the opportunity to get all of those benefits. So things like fiber, which we are understanding more and more and more about how important fiber and sort of gut health is when it comes to kidney stone prevention. I'm actually having a podcast episode with a researcher in the gut microbiome and oxalate metabolism and kidney stones. So definitely be looking out for that episode in a couple months. I believe it's coming out because that's going to be a really, really good one. But point being that fiber is really, really, really important for a healthy gut microbiome, and that can help prevent kidney stones more than we probably ever realized. So kind of thinking about how a low oxalate diet is going to be virtually impossible to get in enough fiber on a strict low oxalate diet. It's also going to be very difficult to get in magnesium, which we know is really good for oxalate stone prevention, really good to get in enough potassium and other alkali precursors, which essentially is a fancy word of saying foods that help sort of balance your pH or acid levels in your body as well as your urine. Spoiler alert, for sure, all fruits and vegetables produce alkali or help neutralize acid, whereas all meat protein, so pork, beef, chicken, fish, seafood, all of those things produce acid. And of course, we know that on a strict low oxalate diet, it can make it really difficult to get in enough fruits and vegetables because those are the exact foods that are limited. And so a lot of times a strict low oxalate diet may actually sort of lean someone into eating a more acid producing diet, which is generally not a good thing when it comes to stone prevention for the vast majority of people. I, of course, talked a lot about how it makes a whole lot more sense to focus on reducing how much oxalate gets absorbed into your system via a variety of mechanisms, as opposed to limiting strictly how much oxalate you consume, because, again, this low oxalate diet is going to be essentially void or much lower, make it very, very difficult to get in all these things that we know are really good for stone prevention. Also talked a ton about how the liver makes quite a bit of oxalate every single day, and how much oxalate you eat actually accounts for a very small percentage of the oxalate that ends up in your urine. And we really need to be thinking about the liver and how much oxalate that is making, and the things that we eat that could actually make our liver make more oxalate. So most notably excessive amino acids or excessive protein, which is another reason to avoid eating a ton of that animal protein specifically. And also vitamin C are kind of the two big things that your liver is super, super good at making oxalate from. So that is why we always talk about avoiding vitamin C supplements for people, especially with oxalate stones, because the liver can make oxalate from excessive ascorbic acid or vitamin C. I always have to kind of give that disclaimer that we do not want to be limiting, we don't want a low vitamin C diet, we don't want to be limiting oranges and, other citrus fruits or fruits and vegetables that have vitamin C. It's really those excessive amounts of vitamin C that we're pretty much only going to be getting from supplements where it really becomes an issue. I also dove into the gut microbiome a little bit more. I kind of touched on that earlier, but really talking about how the two ways that the gut microbiome can really help reduce kidney stone formation is certain bacteria actually eat up oxalate, which is pretty sweet because then that oxalate isn't available to get absorbed into our system and eventually get excreted in our urine. And so, that if as long as we have a healthy gut microbiome and lots of different bacteria, I know there's one, if you dove into this research at all, there's one bacteria that gets a lot of attention, and it's called Oxalobacter formigenes. And that bacteria exclusively lives off of oxalate for its calories, for its energy source. However, there's actually a lot of different bacteria that can degrade oxalate, that can eat oxalate, and again, make that oxalate unavailable to be absorbed into your system. So generally, just a gut microbiome diversity is really what we want to think about when we think about oxalate degradation by those gut bacteria. The other cool thing that your gut microbiome does in terms of stone prevention is all of those little bacteria, or many of them, can make what we call short chain fatty acids, which do a lot of really good things. So they basically can help, those short chain fatty acids can help keep our gut barrier healthy. And that can help basically modulate how our body handles oxalate and calcium, actually. And so it kind of can do some good stuff there. Also, those short chain fatty acids that are produced by those bacteria can actually travel to kidney cells where they can help reduce inflammation, which is really good, we know, for kidney disease, and also likely really good for kidney stone prevention as well. The more inflammation that is there, the sort of easier that it is for kidney stones to form. And so when we have more of these short chain fatty acids, specifically one called butyrate being produced, it can help with that gut barrier as well as travel to your kidneys and sort of have that direct impact on kidney stone formation or not. So lots of really fascinating stuff. If this is interesting to you, definitely make sure to join or to check out my episode that's coming out shortly with someone named Dr. Aaron Miller, who is fantastic, and he's at Cleveland Clinic and does a ton of research in this oxalate metabolism with the gut microbiome. So definitely check out that episode. I'm really looking forward to that one. I also touched a little bit about omega-3 fatty acids in oxalate. There's a very small bit of data that shows that potentially omega-3 fatty acids could reduce how much oxalate's in your urine through this I'm not going to even go into it, but it's like this complicated cascade of what happens when we have omega-3 fatty acids with inflammation and whatever. But basically, when we have more of omega-3 fatty acids, things change that can impact how much oxalate gets excreted in our urine. So there's a small bit of data that shows that omega-3 fatty acids and fish oil supplements specifically can help reduce urine oxalate. So that's kind of cool. Lots of new things that are really interesting on the horizon. And I think it was really, really fun to give that talk because dietitians, I think, were really interested in learning about it. Apparently, the kidney stone talks at NKF are typically very well attended. Sort of for context, NKF, the 95% of the information there that pertains to kidney disease, and there's generally not a lot of information about kidney stones. And so, as you know, kidney stones are my true love, and so it was really, really fun to be able to present this talk to dietitians and really dive into oxalate metabolism and sort of how it's so much more complicated than we might ever think. And yeah, just kind of, fun to be able to talk about that to this, big group of dietitians on this national stage. The next talk that I gave was actually to patients, which was pretty cool. So, obviously most of this conference is healthcare professionals, but there was a very small track, just a one-day sort of seminar for people who have kidney disease, to be able to come and learn and connect with each other. And it was a really, really wonderful program. I wish I could have stayed for longer, but I was running around doing all sorts of things. But I was asked to speak to this patient group sort of about the emotional side of eating, which was a really fun topic. Something that, not typically in my wheelhouse, not something that I've talked about before, but it was really, really fun to kind of talk about how emotional eating really isn't bad. Emotional eating gets such a bad rap, but really food is emotional, and that's a really beautiful thing, right? Like food has obvious, very important ties to our culture, to nostalgia and memories, to religious implications, like all sorts of things, and that is all really good. And so I really hate, when people will say like, oh, how can I stop emotional eating? It's like, that's okay. It's completely okay to use food for comfort. I think that the issue comes is when food is our only way of coping and only source of comfort, right? Then I think it does become an issue. So I think it's important to make sure that you're using food as comfort in the context of lots of other things, whether, this is going to be different for everyone, obviously, but whether it's physical exercise or connecting with friends or reading a book or whatever self-care looks like for you, right? I think that's really, really the issue. I also talked a little bit about how you really don't need to be perfect. That's something that I talk about in my content quite a bit. I think, how you don't make a kidney stone in one day or even 1 week. Sort of the same thing with kidney disease, right? Like nutrition for kidney disease, you're not going to kill your kidneys in a day, right? Like when we think about eating healthfully for pretty much any health condition, it's really looking at sort of stepping back and looking at the big picture. Like it's your habits from weeks to months to years that really make the difference to really kind of help people feel a little bit more empowered that it's completely okay to have a piece of pizza, right? Like it's totally okay, or whatever it is, right? And just kind of helping people not think so black and white about nutrition, because it really, really doesn't have to be, and it really shouldn't be. I think that adds so much unnecessary stress, and I would argue potentially have a negative impact on health, because if you are so stressed about eating healthfully, that is going to have a negative impact on your health, arguably way more than what eating, quote, perfect, big air quotes here, because who knows what that means, would look like, or would the benefits that eating, quote, perfect would have. So it was a really, really fun presentation. So that was fun. And then my last presentation was another talk about kidney stones. I was super pumped that I got to talk about kidney stones twice. And this was actually a joint talk with a nephrologist that I used to work with at the University of Chicago. Her name is Dr. Megan Prohaska. I actually had her on the podcast in some of the very early episodes, so definitely go check that out if you're interested. And we talked to a group of both dietitians as well as doctors, mostly doctors, I believe, in the audience, if I had to stereotype, remembering the audience. But, a group of people just sort of general kidney stone prevention, and really talking about the importance of a 24-hour urine test and individualizing nutrition prevention, not giving one-size-fits-all advice or medications, and really kind of helping doctors and dietitians walk through that 24-hour urine test and help other healthcare professionals know what to do based on that data. So, those were all really, really great talks. It was so much fun. I also moderated 3 talks, so I'll kind of give you a high-level overview of the 3 talks that I moderated. The first one was a panel. It was 2 dietitians and another nephrologist. The dietitians were Dr. Lauren Levy as well as Edith Yang, 2 of my friends and fellow kidney dietitians that I've met online, online and volunteering throughout the years, and a nephrologist who is wonderful and a huge advocate for dietitians and including dietitians as part of care for people with CKD. Her name is Dr. Holly Kramer. She's at Loyola. I'm here in Chicago as well, actually, coincidentally. And we just kind of talked about how important it is to include dietitians in the care of people with kidney disease and how we're pretty sweet. I'm biased. But we can really, truly slow the progression of disease. I think that is a message that needs to get out, right? Like, I think, unfortunately, nephrologists will often say, oh, go talk to a dietitian about eating less salt. Well, that's not fun, right? But if we said, hey, like, go talk to the dietitian about slowing the progression of your kidney disease and delaying or preventing the need of dialysis or a kidney transplant, because that is what dietitians truly can do. There is data that shows that working with a dietitian, if you have kidney disease, will literally slow the progression of your disease, in addition to helping to control sort of signs and symptoms of kidney disease, if you will. So like electrolyte abnormalities or acidosis or fatigue, right? We can help with all of those things as well. Also helping, likely if you have chronic kidney disease, you might also have diabetes or high blood pressure or heart disease, right? And, obviously a dietitian can help with all those things. So we really kind of dove into all of the benefits of including a dietitian in the care of people with kidney disease, and then talked about how it is covered by insurance. So not kidney stones, unfortunately, although many private payers do cover nutrition visits for kidney stones. But for chronic kidney disease, stage 3 and above, essentially, Medicare does cover dietitian visits for kidney disease, which is really exciting because Medicare doesn't cover many nutrition visits. They pretty much only cover dietitian visits for either diabetes or chronic kidney disease, period. That's just a massive, massive benefit. And there's been some analyses done that have shown that this benefit from a national standpoint is only getting utilized. Oh gosh, don't quote me on this, but something like 5% of what it could be being used. And there's also data that shows that only like 20% of people with chronic kidney disease will ever see a dietitian prior to starting dialysis, which is just sad and depressing, quite frankly, because it is a free benefit for many people. So we kind of talked about that and brainstormed ways to help improve that situation, and ways to help dietitians advocate for themselves within, nephrology practices to help our patients see more dietitians essentially for CKD care. So that was really cool. The next talk I gave was by a dietitian named Kelly Picard, who is wonderful. I met her last year and I was like fangirling over her. I met her at the poster sessions last year, and she has written many of the papers that I absolutely love and I cite again and again and again. And I was so excited to see her. And she did a talk this year about potassium and phosphorus additives for chronic kidney disease. I know this is a lot of information about kidney disease, but I know that many of my listeners also have kidney disease in addition to stones. So I hope that it's interesting. So kind of for context, historically, we, for a kidney-friendly diet, I'm putting air quotes here because that's going to be different for every single person, but we sort of restricted things like potassium and phosphorus, which resulted in limiting many fruits and vegetables and whole grains and beans and nuts and seeds, and these things were sort of taken off the table and labeled as bad for patients with chronic kidney disease. However, we now understand that both potassium and phosphorus are much less available. Our bodies don't absorb much of the potassium or phosphorus from these plant-based sources. However, we do absorb quite a bit of the potassium and phosphorus from food additives. So potassium and phosphorus that is added to things like ultra-processed foods, so things like creamers or certain cereals or whatever. And so that has resulted in a huge shift, which I think is a great one, and it's a very exciting one, of letting patients with chronic kidney disease eat fruits and vegetables and nuts and beans and seeds, because we know very clearly that eating more plant-forward in chronic kidney disease will slow what is good for your kidneys. It will improve all sorts of things when it comes to chronic kidney disease, which is uncomfortable for a lot of people because these are the exact foods that we, say, a decade ago were telling people were, quote, bad for their kidneys. And so as a result, we're saying, all right, great, you can eat all this sort of natural potassium and phosphorus because your intestines don't absorb it very well. But when these things are added to foods, it's not so great. And that is definitely true. And so we teach patients to look for ingredients that include the word potassium in there to avoid any potassium additives, as well as any ingredients that have the letters PHOS or FOS. So like diphosphoric acid or trisodium phosphate or something like that, right? There's like literally hundreds to thousands of these different additives that could be in your food that are adding this highly available potassium and phosphorus. And I also want to put a disclaimer out there. If you do not have chronic kidney disease, this is not something that you really need to be concerned about. I want to make things as simple as possible. And it's, there's no reason to think that if you have perfectly normal kidney function and do not have CKD, that these things are of concern. But if you do, they are, simply because your kidneys are not able to get rid of these things as well as kidney functioning at 100%. So back to the talk. That was a lot of lead up to explain what the talk was actually about. So Kelly has gone in and looked at the most common potassium and phosphorus additives to look and see if all of these are the same, right? Most dietitians, including Kelly and myself, want to make things as easy for patients as possible. And when we just say, go avoid all of these additives, and like I said, there's literally thousands, and it's very difficult for patients to find anything to eat, right? Especially that's not like a fresh fruits or vegetable. And obviously most of our diet should be those things, but realistically, like we're going to include some of these processed or ultra processed foods. So her question was, well, are all of these the same? Do they all add a similar amount of potassium and phosphorus? Do all of them really matter? So she went in and did very, very nitpicky work and went in and looked to see exactly how much potassium and phosphorus likely all of these things are adding, and kind of came up with some conclusions. So she said that the additives from a potassium standpoint that were most of concern were potassium chloride, potassium phosphate, potassium citrate, and likely potassium lactate. However, potassium sorbate and aspartame potassium are likely not an issue. So that's getting real into the weeds, but I think it's really, really interesting and just such refreshing information that helps our patients be able to eat more. So that was really interesting. And then the last session that I moderated was by a fellow renal dietitian who I also met online, who happens to live in my neighborhood here in Chicago. Her name is Kate Zalewski, and she's wonderful. She's your kidney dietitian on Instagram if you want to check her out. And she gave a talk about plant-based diets for dialysis patients. I think, there's a huge push for people who have chronic kidney disease who aren't on dialysis to eat more plant-forward foods, but there's less data in the dialysis population. And so she was kind of making the case that yes, there is a bit of data and a lot of things that make a whole lot of sense in terms of eating a more plant-based diet would be beneficial for dialysis patients as well as patients who have chronic kidney disease who are not on dialysis. The other talk I wanted to just mention real quick that was really interesting was by a PhD RD named Brian Kistler, who actually works at Purdue. He's a researcher there, and so I've met him. He's kind of in my network here in the Midwest, and he won a really fancy award, and it was so fun to see him get that award. But he gave a talk about kind of protein and chronic kidney disease and how the data around eating a very low protein diet for chronic kidney disease, in kidney stone world, we talk about eating sort of not too much protein, but in kidney disease, we really do talk about a true low protein diet. So eating much less protein than is typically recommended for the average person. And kind of really diving into that and saying like, oh, the data for that really isn't that strong. And he kind of put this into historical context, from, what we were recommending for dialysis patients back in like the 1950s and how we literally, apparently I wasn't around in 1950, but, and even after that, honestly, we're having patients consume like butter and like sugar balls, essentially, from my understanding, because we were so afraid of that potassium and phosphorus in basically every other food. Now we've sort of totally done a 180 because now we understand just a whole lot more. That's how science works, right? Like over years, we learn more and we can do better and better for our patients and things change. So kind of giving us the historical context and how we kind of were in this low protein diet era, and that's certainly what the most current guidelines are, but really when you look at the data, it's not that strong. And what really is a lot stronger is that plant-based proteins really are likely the best for our kidneys. It's not so much how much protein you eat, but perhaps the type of protein that you eat that makes the biggest difference when it comes to chronic kidney disease. So that was a really lovely talk from Brandon as well. So overall, like I said, it was a really wonderful conference, and I am planning on being on the planning committee for the 2026. Can't believe we're already thinking about 2026 NKF meeting as well. And so just really exciting. We have a meeting a couple weeks from now to start planning for the next year, because it's amazing how much work goes into planning these meetings and getting all the speakers together and coming up with a list of topics that are interesting to people and cutting edge and all those things. So I'm excited to plan for next meeting and cannot wait to go to the meeting in New Orleans next year. So I will end this episode of the podcast. I hope that was an interesting episode for you. Like I said, it's a little bit different, but I know that there's lots of dietitians that listen to the podcast, so I thought I might give them a quick overview of everything that's going on. And I know that many people also have chronic kidney disease as well as stones, so might be interested to learn a little bit about sort of some of the cutting edge talks at NKF. I mean, there was many, I don't know how many. I'm going to guess like 35 to 40 just dietitian talks. But these are the ones that I attended or gave. And so wanted to give a quick overview. Thank you as always for joining me on the Eat Away Kidney Stones podcast. If you have a question that you would like me to tackle on the podcast, I would love to hear from you. If you just go to kidneystonepodcast.com, you can record your question for a chance to get answered on the podcast. And I hope to see you next Wednesday. Have a good day. Thank you for listening to today's episode. For more help with kidney stones, check out my website, www.thekidneydietitian.org. For more personalized help from me, check out my online course, Kidney Stone Nutrition School. VIP enrollment includes help directly from me. I can't wait to see you there and help you prevent kidney stones. Have a great day.